this big crisis is happening in this place that I have such a connection to and has been so meaningful for me for 2 years. I feel like I need to be back. I want to be a part of this. I want to help cover it. I think I can be useful.
This is the deadliest outbreak of Ebola on record.
It's been raging in Africa, specifically in the West African nation of Liberia.
What we're seeing here is a healthcare system that itself has been infected by the Ebola virus.
It is a disease that is beyond boundaries. It is a disease that is irrespective of who you are.
Breaking news tonight, late tonight within this last hour, NBC News has reported that an American cameraman who has been working as a freelancer for NBC News in Liberia, he has just tested positive for the Ebola virus.
People are literally dying in the streets. Here's the hard truth. In West Africa, Ebola is now an epidemic, of the likes that we have not seen before. It's spiraling out of control. It is getting worse.
I went to Liberia originally because I was a master's student and I had an opportunity to do some research out there with the UN's peacekeeping mission, and I just got kind of sucked in. So there's a neighborhood in Monrovia called West Point. It's a fairly large, what I guess you might call slum. Although I don't, love that word. I feel like it kind of strips people who live there of their dignity. This neighborhood was right next to the neighborhood that I lived in for the 2 years that I was in Monrovia. And in August 2014, there was a very highly publicized incident where some people from the neighborhood of West Point were angry that an Ebola holding center had been put in their community without their permission. There was a protest that got aggressive and ended with these people actually breaking open the gates to this treatment center and releasing some dozen or 24 confirmed Ebola patients into the wider community. Within the context of things in Liberia being already so frightening and uncertain, for there to have all of a sudden been this dispersal of potential patients into one of the most densely packed neighborhoods in the country, this produced a lot of fear in the government, and their response to being out of control of the outbreak was to be very aggressive and heavy-handed. And they sent an army unit to circle the neighborhood and essentially quarantine people so that they couldn't leave and that nobody could get in.
So 21 days you will not leave from here.
For me, I'm too desperate. I'm too disappointed and disenchanted because I've seen our soldier who should be protecting us.
This was a phenomenally bad decision. What it did was provoke a confrontation between people in this neighborhood and police that wound up getting a kid killed. I read a news report by a guy named Nori Onishi, who's a New York Times correspondent. He wrote this article about what had happened in West Point, and it just hit really close to home. this big crisis is happening in this place that I have such a connection to and has been so meaningful for me for 2 years. I feel like I need to be back. I want to be a part of this. I want to help cover it. I think I can be useful. And when this thing with West Point happened, it was unavoidable. I think as soon as I read about that, the decision was basically made. I was staying in a pretty central district in Monrovia, like kind of a business district. I started pitching articles, I started shooting footage, and at that point there was such a high demand for any kind of coverage coming out of these countries because people were afraid to go. And this is a bit of a touchy thing because it was a tragedy and it was a horrible spectacle of suffering and pain. But, for people who, like myself, were working as a journalist, and I think a lot of, the disaster response people probably felt the same thing. There was a kind of adrenaline and I almost want to call it an excitement. You felt like you were a part of something important. The intensity of the desperateness almost that was around us. You didn't feel like it was just something that nobody was going to pay attention to. We were in the midst of the biggest story on earth. I think at the point that I got there was probably a comfortable capacity for somewhere around, I'd say 175 Ebola patients, and I think combined in the 3 centers, we probably had closer to 250 or 300. The conditions inside these places were rough. I don't think I was fully prepared for how it was going to feel to see people who were that sick, and you didn't have to go searching through nooks and crannies to find it. The crew sends me to go run an interview with someone at a different hotel. I've been working consistently for something like 30 days at that point, so I was sort of used to being a little bit exhausted. I went downstairs and there was a car waiting for me outside. The guy said, jump in, opened the door, and I got in. I kind of leaned back in the car. And I just, it's like that feeling that you get when you know you're about to get sick. Like your body just kind of droops. You feel like it's not quite like a muscle ache as much as it's just like a shiver, like I just don't feel good. And immediately, what the fuck is that? For weeks and weeks on end, anytime your nose itched, you think, do I have Ebola? And you stick a thermometer in your mouth. And this time, I got concerned because I actually felt unwell. So I had the driver take me back to this apartment that I was staying in. Went upstairs and got my thermometer that I've been using for the past week to check my temperature and stuck it in my mouth and watched that little green LCD dial just jump. And it's like every number as it ticked upwards, my heart started to beat faster and faster until by the time it hit 101.3, and I remember that number just so vividly. It's like 101.3 and it starts flashing, beep, beep, beep. At least half, if not more, of the people who show up to these Ebola centers were coming in taxis. And it's like, that's probably not the best way to control an infection, to get a taxi to pick someone up and then bring them to the center. But lo and behold, I realize I'm in the same position as the rest of these folks. There's just no ambulances. They're busy. And I can't get on the phone with an ambulance and say, hey, I'm a white American. Can you not pick up this family that's across town today so you can give me a lift to the Doctors Without Borders treatment? And oh, by the way, I'm not even 100% sure I'm sick. So I had to call up a taxi driver that I know, and we get there. And I walk through this steel gate. I'd stood out on the other side of these gates so many times, filming people, talking to people, and there was just this ominous, like it just didn't feel real. I'm going in towards what the doctors call the dirty areas. I was already at this point starting to crash, my fatigue. I realized that I wasn't hungry and I hadn't eaten in 12 hours. And as I'm walking through there, this other guy who worked for Doctors Without Borders that I'd seen a couple of times when I'd been outside of the gates filming, he yells at me because he recognizes me and he's totally freaked out. He's like, "What are you doing in the dirty area?" He's like, "Stop, stop." And I look at him and I'm like, "No, I'm supposed to be here." I started describing the symptoms to the resident doctor who was in charge, and I was just looking at their faces. They looked so worn out and so tired. Like these folks had been every day waking up and staring at people who might not make it through the next 2 days. I'm listing off all the different things that I've been feeling in the last 12 hours. And as I'm saying all these things, his face is getting like more and more like, okay. And that was really the moment that I felt like I was at a point of no return, because he was sure. I could tell by the way he was looking at me that he was definitely sure that I was sick. I went into a big white tent where they kept the suspected patients. I mean, people are like barely walking. Some people are not walking. They're being carried by their family members. Everybody's freaked out. Everybody's sick. Some people are in visible, serious pain. This might actually be the steps towards me dying here. Eventually I got the test back, and it was like time kind of moved in slow motion as these guys walked towards me. It was like the whole thing almost felt graceful, you know, and they came up to me and they stopped, paused for a minute, and the guy says, "So we got the results of your PCR back and you've tested positive for the Ebola virus." But the good news is that your viral load is still very, very low. It's like, okay, all right, well, there you go. This is it, I'm here. I'm in for a fight, and the only thing I can do here is like gear up. I'm gonna make it through this. I'm gonna do whatever the fuck I need to do to survive. So the US Embassy called me pretty soon after the test result came back and said, "Look, we are going to do everything we can. We're gonna get a flight. We're gonna get you out of here." And that was music to my ears. It was like, all right, that's something to look forward to. Okay, when's it gonna get here? Well, we're hoping to get it there by Sunday. You know, at this point, it's Wednesday. I'm thinking, Sunday? That's too far away. I think I said something like that. I was like, "Are you serious? You know, I might be dead by Sunday." And she's like, "Well, look, this is the quickest it's gonna come." You're very privileged as an American citizen in ways that you don't conceptualize until something like this happens to you. You know, Liberians can't get an ambulance and I'm getting a jet. But I was scared. I was like, this 4 days is a long time. People can get sick very rapidly with this disease, and they can get so sick that they're beyond the mend very quickly. At that point, I'd already started to get pretty sick. The fever had cut in, my head was starting to hurt, my eyes were feeling like I couldn't really open them all the way. And some guy with, you know, personal protective equipment, he came in and he brought me 3 buckets, and there were these plastic buckets halfway full of chlorine. He was like, "That's feces, that's urine, and that's vomit." And that was it. I felt really sick on day 1. And then day 2, I woke up and I felt pretty good. It was pretty dramatic, you know, as opposed to how I felt. And I got in my head, like, I kicked this, you know, like I have just the most amazing immune system, like I'm good. You know, I went 24 hours and beat the Ebola virus, and the nurse comes in and I'm like, you know, I'm actually feeling pretty good today. Like maybe I'm gonna be all right. And she looked at me with the saddest look and she went, this thing goes up and down. It comes in waves. She was right, and about 7 hours later, my fever spiked back up. That day, the World Health Organization folks came in to see me, and they called me out into this area behind this plastic fencing where you can talk to people. They started telling me like updates on what was happening, and all of a sudden my entire vision just went white. It was like an old photograph that's been exposed for too long. Or like, you know, in Polaroids, when you first see a Polaroid, it's just this white sort of milky haze. And I kind of staggered and had to grab something, and I was like, you know, I need to head back and lay down. You know, at that point it was bad, you know. People were freaked out. People were like, can you help me? I think I'm dying. I'm like, I don't know. I think I might be dying too. I don't know what to say to anybody. By day 3, I was forcing myself to eat. I was just sweating and feverish. My eyes were really red. I was fatigued. I had 24 hours at that point until the flight came, and I'm taking it down. Every hour that goes by, it's like, all right, I got 23, now I got 22, now I got 18. It was just a ticker. I'm at the finish line. I just need to make it this next 24 hours. I felt sad that the rest of the people in that facility couldn't get the type of care that I was going to get. It was an incredible amount of luck that I was in a position to have a flight come and pick me up, but I had had enough of being in that center. I wanted out. I'm not angry that it happened. I don't regret that it happened. And in fact, I feel blessed that I went through that, as crazy as that sounds. When I look back on it, I feel like in some weird way privileged to have been through something that was that intense and that serious and that real and that alive, and to confront my mortality with that kind of vividness. And you know, I was like, I think I just visited a certain place that most people are never gonna go to, and nor would they want to. It's not something I would recommend. It was a bad experience, but I'm also proud of it. I'm proud that I survived.